What's going on, guys? I'm CFBKings, and welcome back to another episode of the CFBKings Show. Really appreciate you tuning in today. Week 4 is almost here. If you're watching on Thursday night, we've got South Alabama at App State here in just a little while to get things started. But welcome back to the show. Welcome if this is your first time watching or listening on Spotify. The channel and social media pages have been steadily growing lately. It's been wonderful to have college football back, and I'm looking forward to another week of it. All right, let's get right into it. Week 4 is a loaded slate. We have 4 ranked versus ranked matchups, 1 on Friday night and 3 on Saturday, and then tons of off-the-radar games that I think will be very entertaining as well. The game of the week, number 6 Tennessee travels to number 15 Oklahoma. College game day will be there on Saturday morning to get everything started. The Vols are a 7.5-point favorite on the road in Norman, and the over-under is 57.5, giving us an implied score of 32-25. Probably something more practical like 31-24 Tennessee. That 7.5-point spread is the largest for Tennessee on the road over a ranked opponent since 1978, and Oklahoma being a 7.5-point underdog is their largest home dog roll as a ranked team since 1978 as well. The Vols are coming off a 71-0 victory over Kent State last week, and Oklahoma defeated Tulane 34-19. Tennessee quarterback Nico Iamaleava has received a lot of attention from the media over the first couple weeks for what he's been able to do, especially last year in the bowl game, but this year as a true sophomore, he's really excelled. But Tennessee's primary source of offense is actually in their running game. The Vols are third in the FBS in rushing yards per game at 336.3. Dylan Sampson is a beast. I included him in my Heisman Watch top 10 rankings this week. Deshaun Bishop has been great as well. He's averaging 10.1 yards per carry, 22 carries for 222 yards, just absurd. They have 4 players averaging over 6 yards per carry. That includes Nico at quarterback, and he's drawn a lot of attention, but that rushing attack is legit. So I posted about this a lot on Twitter and Instagram after the AP poll came out on Sunday, and Tennessee jumped Missouri. Missouri, who beat a ranked team in Boston College last week, and Tennessee, who beat Kent State, and those two swapped spots. Tennessee and Missouri did at number 6 and number 7. But I wanted to preface by saying I think Tennessee is a very good team. Iamaleava has been phenomenal. The running game, like I mentioned, is insane. But those things can be true alongside the Vols having played virtually no one. And so early in the season, it's tough to really gain a true picture of what a team is, and we're really splitting hairs here. But no disrespect to these programs, Chattanooga, NC State, and Kent State, but that isn't exactly a murderer's row. They beat Kent State 71-0 last week. If you're unfamiliar with the ESPN FPI rankings, ESPN's formula has Kent State as the worst, 134th out of 134 teams, the worst team in the FBS. And I'd venture to say that they're actually worse than a lot of the FCS too, considering that they lost to FCS St. Francis of Pennsylvania 23-17 in week 2. NC State struggled with FCS Western Carolina in week 1. They had to pull away late in the fourth quarter, and they trailed Louisiana Tech by double digits last week. And sandwiched between those, they lost by 41 to Tennessee. So, the Wolfpack, they came into the season looking like a potential contender, but Grayson McCall hasn't quite panned out at quarterback. He also got hurt, so now they're starting a true freshman, I think, this week. But, Tennessee's FCS opponent, Chattanooga, is winless. They are 0-3 and scored 3 points on fellow FCS team Mercer last week. So, point being, Tennessee has looked great. And while that's true, they also have not been tested in the slightest. The combined record of their opponents is 2-7. As for Oklahoma, they had a solid test from Tulane last week, who they beat by 15. Tulane nearly took down Kansas State in week 2, and the Green Wave has looked very impressive so far. They led the Wildcats for basically all of that game until a late turnover against K-State in week 2. But the Sooners have been able to face a formidable opponent so far. They had a low-scoring, sluggish game against Houston, a 16-12 win. They also beat Temple 51-3 in week 1. So they have a blowout of their own. They also have a couple tight games with Houston's a conference member, and then Tulane is one of the contenders for that group of 5 CFP spots. So probably not anymore with the 2 losses, but they were close to winning both of those games. They were actually in a one-score game with Oklahoma in the fourth quarter before the Sooners pulled away. But other than week 1, though, the Sooner offense hasn't been anything explosive. Jackson Arnold hasn't thrown for over 200 in any game this year. They haven't had a 100-yard rusher in any game, and they haven't had a 100-yard receiver in any game. And Arnold's going to have to be sharper. He's going to have to be a lot more accurate, and he's going to have to make safer decisions with the ball. What has been impressive for Oklahoma is that Brent Venables' defense. They gave up 3 to Temple, they gave up 12 to Houston, and they gave up 13 to Tulane. Tulane had a pick 6 to get to 19, so the defense gave up 13, but 13, 12, and 3. They, of course, have a whole different challenge coming to town with Tennessee's offensive attack, but very impressive so far on the defensive side of the ball. This is Oklahoma's 4th consecutive home game and is Tennessee's first true road game. Tennessee did go to Charlotte to face NC State, but that was in the Panthers Stadium at a neutral site. It's Nico Iamaleava's first true road game as a starter. It's Oklahoma's first SEC game, and that team and that crowd's going to be pretty riled up, ready to assert themselves as a competitor in their new conference. So Tennessee's a 7.5-point favorite here, and this is in Norman. So accounting for home field advantage, that means that they'd be about a 9-point favorite, maybe a 10-point favorite at a neutral site, and probably like an 11 or 12-point favorite in Neyland, which is pretty impressive. That's kind of a lot. This 7.5 on the road over a touchdown feels a little wide. I feel like there's kind of a little bit of an overreaction to that 71-0 win over Kent State. And like I said, no disrespect to Kent State, not to pile onto them, but that team is not good. And what Oklahoma is going to put on the field defensively for Nico Iamaleava in his first true road start, I think there's going to be some challenges there, and vice versa for Jackson Arnold going against Tennessee. Each defense is by far the best of what either offense has seen so far. And I think Tennessee will win this game. I don't know if they cover that over a touchdown spread. What I really like is the under 57.5. Like I said, with Nico going into a hostile environment, Arnold hasn't been impressive. Neither offense has really played a challenging defense yet so far. So first challenge of the season really for both. I think that under 57.5 is a pretty solid number. But yeah, I think Tennessee wins this game. I think Oklahoma has the potential to cover, but probably a low-scoring game either way. Next up, we have number 11 USC at number 18 Michigan. The Trojans are a 5.5-point favorite in the Big House. Over-under is 46.5, giving us an implied score of 26-21 USC. This is the second time Michigan has been a home underdog in the last 3 weeks, and they got dominated by Texas in week 2, and now the fringe top 10 Trojans are looking to really do the Wolverines in for this 2024 season. I've tweeted this a couple times recently, but through the first 3 weeks of the season, Michigan has not looked like a top 25 team. I don't have them in my top 25, and I've been pretty vocal that with what we've seen so far, there are absolutely 25 teams better than Michigan and several more deserving of sliding into one of those AP poll spots. Now, that's just my opinion. I may end up being very wrong as the season progresses, but as of what we've seen so far, Michigan has not impressed in really any facet except for like Will Johnson at defensive back. He's been good. But the Wolverines are 2-1. They beat Fresno State 30-10. That was a 16-10 game with 6 minutes left, though. They scored 2 touchdowns late, including a pick 6 from Johnson to make that score look better. They beat Arkansas State 28-18. The Red Wolves scored a late touchdown to make that one more competitive, but that's an Arkansas State team who gave up 31 to their FCS opponent. Central Arkansas scored more on Arkansas State than Michigan did. The quarterback that they named starter for the first 3 games, Davis Warren, has thrown 6 interceptions. That's tied for the second most of any quarterback in the country and the most of any quarterback in the Big Ten. Donovan Edwards hasn't impressed at all. Khalil Mullings has been Michigan's featured back so far. The defense gave up 24 in the first half to Texas, and that was really a debatable holding penalty away from being 31. So against the only significant high-powered offense that they've faced so far, they got totally dominated. Maybe they can get a spark out of Alex Orji, who they replaced Warren with at quarterback this week. He was actually the projected starter before the season, but ended up getting beaten out by Warren. He's getting a chance now. He's a more dynamic runner, but we'll see what he can do through the air. USC is 2-0, and they've looked like a completely different team defensively than what we've been accustomed to seeing from Lincoln Riley's teams. They're coming off a bye week, but in their last game in week 2, the Trojans beat Utah State 48-0. That is just the second time that they haven't allowed double digits in a game since 2016, and is their first shutout since 2011. 2011, Lane Kiffin was their head coach the last time that they shut a team out. And for what it's worth, USC finished number 6 in that season. That Utah State team scored 21 against Utah last week and was in a one-possession game with the Utes going into the fourth quarter. So, pretty interesting comparison there. I know the transitive property is not, all that reliable, but from what we have so far, that's pretty notable. USC allowed just 190 total yards to Utah State. Utah allowed 385. So a small sample size between two games, but very impressive relative numbers for that Trojan defense. Miller Moss has been great at quarterback so far, 607 yards through 2 games. So he's averaging 303.5 per game. Woody Marks has been a solid running back, averaging 6 yards per rush. He's got 171 yards and 3 touchdowns. Quentin Joyner has been good too. He's averaging 7 yards per rush. He has 96 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Lincoln Riley has won 6 of his last 7 games as a head coach coming off a bye week. The main thing that I'm concerned about in making a pick in this game is Michigan's desperation. Everything seems to point to USC being better so far, USC being more impressive, USC being the smarter option to pick. They have the win over LSU. Michigan really hasn't impressed in any facet, like I said, except for a couple guys on defense. But Michigan is in a situation coming off a national championship where their season really hinges on this game. The loss to Texas was one thing, but a second loss, especially one in a conference game with USC now being in the Big Ten, would basically eliminate the Wolverines from being in Big Ten title contention if you factor in their remaining opponents, and would likely eliminate them from an at-large college football playoff bid as well. That's considering that they still go on the road to a currently ranked Illinois team. They go to Washington, they play Oregon, they go on the road to Ohio State. So this is really it. This is a survive and advance situation for Michigan to keep their hopes alive, and everything's pretty much on the line in terms of what they came into 2024 hoping to accomplish. That makes me pretty nervous to pick USC, but based on what I've seen so far, I really think the Trojans have the better team. I think they have the better offense, and as strange as it is to say, I think they have the better defense so far. USC has a better head coach with, Sharon Moore being in just his first year. What Miller Moss has been able to do has, far exceeded anything that Davis Warren or Alex Orji in the limited time that he's been on the field, what they've been able to do. So the crowd is concerning, and the home field advantage can definitely play a factor there. Like I said, Michigan's backs are up against the wall, but the biggest key is for the Trojans to get out to a hot start and to take the air out of the stadium and make things a little easier for Moss and the offense. And if they can do that, I think they have a good shot. So I'm going to go with my gut. I'll take USC to get it done in the Big House. Week 4 also has a major showdown in the Big 12 between number 12 Utah and number 14 Oklahoma State, a game with massive implications for the Big 12 title and college football playoff race. Oklahoma State is a 2.5-point favorite. The over-under is 54, giving us an implied score of 28-26 Cowboys. Utah gets Cam Rising back at quarterback. He'd been out for a bit with a finger injury on his throwing hand, but he's back now. This is a matchup between two quarterbacks with a ton of experience. Rising is in his 7th year of college football, and Oklahoma State quarterback Alan Bowman is a 7th-year senior as well. It's also a battle between two of the longest tenured head coaches in college football. Kyle Whittingham has been the head coach at Utah, and Mike Gundy has been the head coach at Oklahoma State, both since 2005. Coming into the season, Ollie Gordon was one of the biggest names in the sport. He was largely considered one of the preseason Heisman favorites, the best running back in the country, and so far this season, that has not been the case. He has 62 carries for 216 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's 3.5 yards per carry. For context, he averaged 6.1 yards per carry last season. What has been impressive, though, is that his underwhelming performances haven't lost them any games, which coming into the season, it felt like he was going to be their guy, and if he didn't do as expected, they probably were going to lose. And they haven't so far. They're 3-0, and with their inability to establish a strong running game, quarterback Alan Bowman has stepped up and thrown for 967 yards and 8 touchdowns in 3 games. His 967 yards are the 6th most of any quarterback so far this season, and he's done that working the ball to several different receivers. The Cowboys have 4 different guys averaging over 17 yards per catch. Brennan Presley, Rashad Owens, and Dejon Stribling have all been phenomenal so far. The deciding factor in this game, in my opinion, will be if Ollie Gordon can get some semblance of a rushing attack going. Oklahoma State's only Power 4 opponent so far, Arkansas, has the 7th best run defense in the country. Utah's is 31st. So if Gordon can wear down that defensive front, be a threat, and open up more of that passing game, I think the Cowboys will win this game. If Gordon has 85 plus yards, if they can get him over 85, I think they'll get the job done. If Utah can keep Gordon to a 50 or 60 yard game like we've seen so far this season, I think that'll swing things in favor of the Utes. As for Utah, getting Rising back is significant, of course. They're going into a very hostile environment, and having his experience and composure to approach that with is major. It is concerning, though, that the injury is on his throwing hand, and the first game back is against the defense that has guys like Nick Martin and Obi Ezigbo and Kendall Daniels and Trey Rucker, Corey Black, among others. But Oklahoma State losing Colin Oliver is a massive break for Utah. Oliver had been insane throughout the first couple weeks, but if the rest of that defensive crew can pressure Rising into a couple ill-advised throws, potentially force a turnover, keep the crowd in it, that would go a long way to a Cowboy victory. I think with the home field advantage at Boone Pickens Stadium, the fact that Oklahoma State has already had a Power 4 team go in there, Arkansas gave them a very tight game, a double overtime game, but Oklahoma State did what they needed to do to win and found a way to do so. I think the Cowboys carry that confidence and momentum into this game on Saturday, defeat Utah, and solidify themselves as the team to beat in the Big 12 this year. On Friday night, we have another ranked versus ranked matchup. This one's between number 24 Illinois and number 22 Nebraska. The Huskers are a 7.5 point favorite. The over-under is 42.5, giving us an implied score of 25-17 Nebraska. This is Illinois' first road game and Nebraska's 4th consecutive home game there at Memorial Stadium. So scheduling-wise and location-wise, definitely a massive advantage for the Huskers. Both teams have played phenomenal defense so far this year. Nebraska is currently 8th in points per game allowed at 6.7, and Illinois is 14th at 8.7 points per game allowed. Their offenses have been pretty comparable as well. Nebraska is averaging 34 points per game, and Illinois is averaging 32.7 points per game. To be straightforward, I really like Nebraska in this game. They've got the home field advantage. Illinois has to go into a wild environment on a Friday night. I think the Illini are a little bit overrated. I don't quite think this is a ranked versus ranked matchup like it's presented. Illinois is ranked because they beat number 19 Kansas. But the Jayhawks are 1-2. Jalen Daniels has thrown 6 interceptions. Kansas lost to UNLV at home last week, and that isn't quite as big of a win as it seemed a couple weeks ago. So their other wins are Central Michigan, who lost to FIU 52-16, and their FCS opponent Eastern Illinois, who was also blown out by Northwestern. Nebraska's schedule hasn't been a gauntlet either by any means. They did at least dominate Colorado, but according to the ESPN FPI, Nebraska is ranked 25th and Illinois is 46th. Nebraska is 26th in offensive efficiency. Illinois is 70th. Illinois' rushing offense is 73rd. Nebraska's rushing defense is 16th. I think it's going to be very hard for the Illini to pick up anything on the ground. One area that Illinois has to excel in order to win this game is in forcing Nebraska freshman quarterback Dylan Raiola to throw an interception, potentially even 2. Illinois has the 3rd most interceptions of any team in the FBS right now. One of them was a pick 6. So that's one area where Illinois has a potential edge in the secondary, or at least secondary production, what they've done so far. But again, that is against some very lackluster offenses, and we'll see how they do this week. Like, for example, 3 of those 6 interceptions came off Jalen Daniels at Kansas. He also threw 2 against UNLV and 1 against FCS Lindenwood. So he's been a turnover machine, and Illinois got to take advantage of that. Prediction-wise, I'll take Nebraska to win outright. I lean toward taking them to cover as well. 7.5 isn't a great number. I'd be much more comfortable at 6.5 and get that touchdown margin. But maybe it's a one-score game. The Huskers kick a field goal or something to seal it late and cover. I can definitely see that happening. All right, a couple rapid-fire games here. Stanford at Syracuse is also Friday night. A nice primetime ESPN slot for Kyle McCord and the Orange to really make a case for themselves in front of a big audience. They're a fringe top 25 team right now, according to the AP. I personally have them ranked, but McCord, Gadsden, Pena, Allen, that offense is seriously talented, and the defense has been great as well. A big stage for them to earn some national recognition. NC State travels to number 21 Clemson at noon on Saturday. This was a game coming into the season that felt like it would be a major matchup for the ACC race, but now Clemson is a 20-point favorite. The Wolfpack will be without starting quarterback Grayson McCall, who hasn't looked at all like he did at Coastal Carolina, unfortunately, for NC State. They're starting CJ Bailey, a freshman and a 4-star in the class of 2024. He's 6'6", almost 6'7", a huge athlete. He can scramble, he can run, but that Clemson defense will likely be overwhelming there in his first career start. Florida travels to Mississippi State at noon on Saturday. Both teams are 1-2, and the Gators are a 6-point favorite in Starkville, which is something of note. We'll get another look at Florida's QB situation. I don't know if they've announced what they're going to be doing there, if they're just going to keep switching between Mertz and Lagway, or what the case is. But the Bulldogs got run out of Davis-Wade Stadium last week by Toledo, so we'll see if the Gators can earn a bounce-back win after their loss last week and potentially quiet down some of the talk about Billy Napier and his job situation, at least for now. Georgia Tech goes to number 19 Louisville at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2, a very interesting matchup in the ACC. Louisville is a 10-point favorite, but like a couple teams I was talking about earlier, Louisville hasn't had a test yet this season. They've played Austin Peay, who they beat 62-0, and Jacksonville State, who they beat 49-14. They've done what they're supposed to do against inferior competition, but they have certainly not played a team like Georgia Tech. This is Georgia Tech's 5th game and Louisville's 3rd game. Georgia Tech played in week 0 and hasn't had a bye week yet, and Louisville had their bye week last week. So Georgia Tech's played 4 games, Louisville's played 2. This will be their 5th and their 3rd, respectively. And the Yellow Jackets have a bit more on-field experience this year and experience against Power 4 competition. Tech's already played 2 ACC teams in Florida State and Syracuse, so something to keep an eye on there. Georgia Tech head coach Brent Key is 5-0 against ranked ACC opponents, so it'll be interesting to see if he can continue that trend or if Louisville can potentially put a stop to it. Arizona State at Texas Tech is another fun one. The Red Raiders are a 3-point favorite. First Big 12 game of the year for both. Over-under is 60.5, so expect some points to be scored. The Sun Devils are 3-0. Texas Tech is 2-1, with their lone loss coming to Washington State. So 2 solid teams so far this year, and a game that could be one of the more entertaining ones of the week from an offensive perspective. Number 8 Miami travels to USF this week. The Bulls gave Alabama all they could handle in Tuscaloosa a couple weeks ago, until the Tide scored some late points to make that score look deceiving. But USF gets to host Miami, which is interesting. They have that experience against the top 10 team already. They played really well in that game for the most part, and now get another shot against a major team this week. Miami is a 16.5-point favorite, but definitely one to keep an eye on. Michigan State at Boston College has potential to be a great one. That's Boston College's red bandana game this season, 8 p.m. Eastern on the ACC network. BC's a touchdown favorite, but Jonathan Smith has the Spartans looking much improved from what they had been last year. A good game there in that Saturday primetime slot to switch between with Tennessee and Oklahoma. And last but not least, we have number 13 Kansas State traveling to BYU at 10:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. The Wildcats are just a 6.5-point favorite after beating Arizona 31-7 last week. So we'll see how they approach containing BYU quarterback Jake Retzlaff, who has thrown for 841 yards this year, which is the 19th most of any quarterback in the country. That crowd will be awesome and a great game as the Week 4 nightcap. All right, time for some weekly wagers. I said it the past couple weeks, but I wanted to preface again by saying that if you don't engage in any wagering, just keep it that way. If you do, be smart about it. Set some rules for yourself. Know your limits. Know what you can't afford to lose. Stick to your rules and be wise, but yeah, don't believe what you see on all these commercials that they run during games and stuff on Saturday. There's far more losing than there is winning. And don't believe what you see on social media, especially because half of that stuff isn't even real. So, yeah. But if you don't do it yourself, but you find the premise entertaining, stick around for a couple minutes. And if you don't want to hear about it at all, feel free to check out now. Last week we did all right. Certainly not the 3-0/5-2 that we put together in week 2, but last week we went 2-3 with the ones that I offered here, and 5-3 overall. So I usually put out a few more in addition to these on Twitter on Saturday mornings during game day. But 5-2 in week 2, 5-3 in week 3, 10-5 overall. So I'll take 66.7% every week of the year because that means we are earning. First up, we have App State at South Alabama. Tonight's game, if you're watching on Thursday, it's probably going on by now already, but I'm going under 62.5 in this game. Now, if you look at what South Alabama did last week, that number might not feel right, but if you don't know, the Jaguars scored 87 on their FCS opponent, Northwestern State, last week. However, Northwestern State is, to put it lightly, terrible, and they have lost their last 11 games that they played. They also gave up 62 to Tulsa and 37 to Prairie View A&M. That defense is frightening, and in South Alabama's other games, they've scored 20 on Ohio and 38 on North Texas, but North Texas has the 129th ranked defense out of 134 teams. They're 129th. Ohio's is 70th, so the defenses that South Alabama has faced are 70th, 129th, and potentially one of the worst in the country in Northwestern State. App State's numbers aren't great either, but that's because they played Clemson at least. And outside of that game, the Mountaineers have given up 10 to their FCS opponent and 19 to East Carolina. So 62.5 just seems like a little bit too much. It seems a little too high. And, it's a short week for both teams. They're playing on a Thursday night. I like the under 62.5 in this one. Then we have Clemson minus 20.5 against NC State. The Tigers served us well in week 2. I had them minus 16.5 against App State, and they cleared that by 30. They won by 46 as a 16.5 point favorite. So, like I said a minute ago, NC State will be without Grayson McCall. Really not super big of a factor with how he's played so far this year. He hasn't been at all like he was at Coastal Carolina. So we'll see what freshman CJ Bailey can do in his first start, but the Tigers are rested. They're coming off a bye week. The Wolfpack was in a one-possession game with FCS Western Carolina in week 1. They got murdered by Tennessee by 41 in week 2. They trailed Louisiana Tech by 11 at one point last week and needed a late comeback to win. They haven't impressed really at any point this season. The last time NC State beat Clemson in Death Valley was in 2002 with Phillip Rivers at quarterback. And now we need Clemson to not only win, but win by 21. I think the Tigers will be hungry to avenge that loss in Raleigh last year to the Wolfpack, and I think they'll get it done by 21 or more. I also have Clemson's team total over 32.5 points, so we just need the Tigers to score 33 plus. NC State allowed 21 to their FCS opponent, 51 to Tennessee, and 20 to Louisiana Tech. I can definitely see that Tiger offense if they get even a fraction of what they had from Cade Klubnik and that freshman wide receiver duo in Brian Wesco and TJ Moore. If they can get even a semblance of what they had out of those guys in week 2, I can see the Tigers finishing with more than 32 points, probably somewhere around 35, 38, maybe 40 plus, but it also wouldn't surprise me if they had a defensive touchdown too to contribute to that. With CJ Bailey making his first career start for NC State at quarterback on the road in one of the toughest places to play in our sport, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they slipped up one time and missed a guy on the edge. Bailey gets sacked, drops the ball or something, or maybe just throws a pick six. Next up, West Virginia minus 2.5 at home against Kansas. The Mountaineers have had a brutal start to the season. They lost to Penn State at home, 34-12. The score wasn't quite as bad as it looked, or the margin at least. That 34-12 was a little deceiving. They also had a major weather delay in that game right in the middle of it. Took a lot of the fans out of the stadium, quite literally. The second half crowd was like half of what it was in the first half. But then last week they had a 10-point lead over Pitt with 3 minutes left. They had a 98.6% chance to win with 3 minutes left, according to the ESPN win probability chart, but gave up 2 late touchdowns to lose 38-34. So I think they bounced back this week. I mentioned it a minute ago with Illinois, but Kansas has been a turnover machine all year. Jalen Daniels has not looked at all like he did in past seasons for Kansas. They've fumbled the ball a lot. They've thrown a lot of interceptions. I think that Mountaineer defense forces a pick or two, and then I think Garrett Green, C.J. Donaldson, Jaheim White, and that West Virginia offense gets it done by more than 2 points. All right, a couple more here. Arkansas State and Iowa State. The total in that game is 51.5, and I'm going under that number. Iowa State has the number 21 defense in the country right now, allowing just 11 points per game. They allowed 3 to North Dakota and 19 to Iowa, so they really haven't had a super strong offensive challenge, but Arkansas State scored 18 last week against Michigan and just 28 against Tulsa, who has the 121st ranked defense. I think it's a low-scoring game, and I think we get under 51.5. Virginia is on the road at Coastal Carolina on Saturday. Very fun game here. The Cavaliers are Coastal Carolina's first Power 4 opponent so far, and the Chanticleers have beaten Jacksonville State, William & Mary, and Temple. And in all 3 of those games, they allowed 20+. So I do like Virginia's spread, 3.5, but I also like Virginia's team total over 30.5 points. You're not going to be impressed by their performance last week, but I think that 13-point effort against Maryland will be an outlier this season. No disrespect to Jacksonville State and William & Mary and Temple, but if they're all scoring at least 20 on Coastal Carolina, I think Virginia can get 31+. And last but not least, we've got a bunch this week, but UConn's hosting FAU, and they are 2.5-point favorites. The Huskies beat their FCS opponent 63-17 and nearly took out Duke on the road last week. And I think FAU making the cross-country trip, cross-country vertically. This game's at 7 p.m. Eastern, and it's supposed to be low 60s, high 50s, and potentially raining. So the elements may favor UConn a little bit. I like what I've seen from their team so far, and I think they can cover the 2.5. All right, we've got a good number of picks this week, more than any week so far. I guess I just like the board for this week. But, yeah, week 4 is a solid slate. Really looking forward to it, and appreciate you watching. Thank you for making it all the way to the end. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube, and follow if you're on Spotify. And definitely make sure, if you haven't already, go follow at CFBKings on Twitter and Instagram for all things college football. Thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and take care.